What's up guys, it's Collin from Built2Wander. Today I've got our Ford Bronco Badlands behind me, and we just switched from the 37-inch Nitto Ridge Grappler down to the 35-inch Nitto Trail Grappler. So I'm going to talk about why we did that, and more specifically do a comparison between those two tires, because the 37 and 35-inch tire seem to be about the threshold for the Ford Bronco without causing major modifications to run something larger. So we'll talk about actual size comparison of the tires, weight and rolling resistance, how that affects drivability, and also fitment requirements such as lift kits and other modifications needed, as well as the cost associated with running each tire. Before we get started, like this video, subscribe to the Driving Line channel, and let's get after it. So back in November, we refreshed our Ford Bronco build, and it featured a set of 37-inch Nitto Ridge Grapplers. The stance looked absolutely amazing. The thing drove just fine, but after doing some off-road testing, I found that the functionality wasn't quite what I wanted it to be. Part of the issue was that the 37s, despite the suspension lift we have on this thing from Bilstein Shock Absorbers, were actually contacting our fiberglass front fenders. My fear was if it hit them hard enough, the glass would actually crack, and then we'd have a pretty big issue on our hands. Secondly, this is my wife's daily driver. She goes up and down all around town, day in, day out. And so the drivability just wasn't quite the same on the bigger tire, and our fuel mileage started to suffer. After changing back to the 35s, we're getting better fuel mileage. This thing drives even better. It's got more pep because we didn't re-gear it. And so overall, I think this is a better fit for this build. So why don't we start by talking about the 37s, comparing those directly to the 35s, and actually the differences between that Ridge Grappler, Trail Grappler, and then from there, we'll talk about the size, the weight, the rolling resistance, the fitment requirements, and also the costs associated. So I want to start by comparing the 37-inch Ridge Grappler that we pulled off the Ford Bronco and the 35-inch Trail Grappler that we just put on it. So the Ridge Grappler is actually a hybrid terrain tire, so it's not a true mud terrain and it's not a true all-terrain. It's kind of in that middle ground. Now, being so, it can hold its own weight off-road, and this thing does not compromise with off-road performance. I've been really impressed with it in my experience. What makes it so nice though on road is it's got this variable pitch tread pattern, which basically ensures a smoother, quieter on-road performance. And for the Bronco being as much daily driven as it is, I actually prefer this tread pattern over the Trail Grappler. Don't get me wrong, I love the Trail Grappler. I run it on our LJ and 392, one of my all-time favorite tires, but I do think this is a better fit for the Ford Bronco. Unfortunately, we just didn't have a set in a size 35. The other thing that I'll say about the Ridge Grappler is it's not got quite the same depth of tread as the Trail Grappler, and that's what makes this thing a bit more aggressive off-road. With the Trail Grappler, it's a true mud terrain tire, so it's got a more aggressive tread pattern, does really great in the rocks, and it's got a 3-ply sidewall, which offers more resistance to puncture, so I believe it's a tougher tire. So either way, I don't think you can go wrong with either one of these options. There's pros and cons to each. I do think the Ridge Grappler is a better fit for the Bronco for our application, but I love both of them each the same. All right, so now that we've discussed the differences between the Ridge Grappler and the Trail Grappler, I wanted to move on and talk about actual weight and rolling resistance and how that affects the drivability of the vehicle. So the Ridge Grappler 37 by 1250 R17 weighs 5.5 pounds more than this 35 by 1250 R17 Trail Grappler, completely aired up. Now, more weight requires the engine to work much harder to get the vehicle up to speed. Also, with a larger tire, you've got a larger contact patch, which leads to more resistance and more friction. That basically equates to more force on the vehicle's drivetrain components. So overall, the vehicle's working much harder despite only 5.5 pounds of difference per tire and only, an 1.5 inches difference in size. And that is felt, I can feel that when we go out and drive the vehicle. You know, we didn't re-gear it, and that obviously helps, but when we're on the road with the 37s, it just doesn't quite have the same acceleration, and it doesn't feel like it's as zippy on road. And also, I think that's a benefit off-road. When you have a little less weight, it's just easier to get up and over obstacles. And so that's kind of, again, why we've turned to the 35 and not the 37. Next, I want to talk about actual fitment of the tire. So here you can see we've got the 35-inch Trail Grapplers mounted. We've got plenty of clearance between the fender and the tire, and with the suspension and steering components. Now, the Bronco that we purchased was the Badlands with the factory Sasquatch package. So it came a little beefed up. It had a factory lift on it, and it came with a 35-inch tire. When we originally added the Trail Grappler, when we did the first rendition of this build, we had no issues with fitment. With the 37, we added a Bilstein Shock Absorbers suspension system with Camberg upper control arms, and we had to max out that Bilstein suspension kit. It goes anywhere from 0 to 2 inches of lift. We added 2 inches of lift front and rear, and then we also added these ADV fiberglass fenders, which give you an additional inch of clearance versus the factory fenders. So I thought we would have enough clearance for this 37-inch tire. Well, I was wrong. After going out, doing some off-road testing, the 37s were getting into the underside of this fender, and I mentioned that was a concern for me because I don't want to crack these fiberglass fenders. And then also, you know, coming into the driveway with the steering locked, the tire would get into the inner fenders. So we had some clearance issues. Going back to the 35s, I actually think we can reduce the amount of lift we have in the suspension kit right now, probably go down to about 1 inch of lift and have plenty of clearance on all 4 corners and be able to use this thing the way it's intended to off-road without any interference. So that's a big thing for me. And again, fitment, it's a huge issue. It's something that you really got to consider what modifications are necessary to fit that 37-inch tire, and is it worth it for you? The last thing worth considering when deciding between a 37 and 35-inch tire for your Ford Bronco is cost. Now, the 37-inch Ridge Grappler is $58 more than the 35-inch Trail Grappler we have on the vehicle now. That adds up to about $300 more when purchasing 5 tires. Now, that's not really a significant cost to most, but what does get significant is when you have to add suspension modifications, steering modifications, beefed up tie rods. The list can go on, and before you know it, you could be $5,000 down the drain or even more. And again, cost is critical. It's something worth considering. For us, based on how we use this Bronco, I don't feel that the additional cost is worth the slight improvement or advantage you may gain off-road. We push our Jeeps a lot harder than we push the Bronco, and for me, it's worth the extra expense in those vehicles. But in the Bronco, I feel satisfied with running a 35-inch tire, saving some of those costs, and having just as much fun on some more moderate trails. There you have it, guys. There's a breakdown of why we went from a 37-inch Nitto Ridge Grappler down to a 35-inch Nitto Trail Grappler for our 2-door Ford Bronco. Things like tire size, weight, rolling resistance, fitment requirements such as suspension and steering modifications, and costs associated with running each tire are all things to consider when deciding the right tire for your build. Drop me a comment below. Let me know if you're having the same debate and trying to decide on what is the right size tire for your Bronco build. And as always, hit the like button if you did and subscribe if you haven't. Until next time, wander on.
Thanks for watching Driving Line. If you guys like this video, consider subscribing to our channel so you'll never miss any of the content we create here. Whether you're into trucks, Jeeps, imports, domestic vehicles, or anything in between, we are here to fuel your passion. So hit that subscribe button and we'll see you guys next time.